This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Resources, a local staffing agency connecting diverse job candidates in central Iowa companies.
Amplified.
So, and I know that you're not, well, I guess I shouldn't say that, but like, I'm not trying to say like looking back, you know, what could have been different, but is Susan's death, that event, is that kind of like created that ripple into the universe, you think? Do you ever think about if she would have lived? I do. What are those thoughts?
Oh, you know, I get emotional and I hate to cry now. I have such a funny thing about like, even though my dad is really sweet and my mom is really sweet and my husband's parents were sweet, I had this silly fantasy of wanting other adults for my children, like grandparents to stand by. And like, I think of me having an aunt, you know, like I was born in 69, she was born in 57. And I know women her age. And like, I do think of what those relationships would have been like, what kind of ripple effect that would have been in my life or my sister's life or my daughter's life to have her. And so I like to think that I've brought her to us in a way that celebrates her, because I have an altar for her and I talk to her all the time in the sense of like, really it meant a lot for me for her to not be this tragedy. And she would have never wanted this whole family to dissolve and my grandmother to not have a relationship with us just because everything stopped for them after Susan died. Yeah. Like we were just these side notes of like, who are these weirdo kids? Like quit touching things. You've seen the note that my grandmother wrote me, maybe like she would write me these hilarious notes. Like, how is this the same woman that loved Susan so much and took her on all these trips and all these explorations, writing me a letter at age 14 saying no one will ever want to be your friend and no one will ever want to look up to you.
This is in the book.
Yeah. And you're just trying to hide behind goofy clothes and dyed hair. Like I know her as mean grandma, right? And to know that she was Susan's mom, but I also can love her too. I wish I had more time to have been able to talk to my grandmother about this, but she was like a person I avoided because it wasn't, you know, you don't get warm and fuzzy and it doesn't feel good. But I know that she suffered in this. And so I think about that ripple effect. And so I'm trying to recreate the ripple effect in a different way for my kids by getting sober and not doing it for them, by not living my life to them.
And you've been sober
for them. Almost 22 years.
22 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And doing it differently. And like, and it's funny because at this point they're like, you know, I should be done talking about this. I should be done talking to like, I did the first art show that was the art of family tragedy and how to be amazing anyway. And my mom was at that show and I had the wall up of Susan's clothing and her music and her singing. And then my mom died in 2018 and we had an incredible moment when she died. Like she came to me, she blasted my heart. She blasted my heart full of love and love and love. And I got to see her and feel her as I did when I was a child. Like it was incredible. I felt her more. All
the drugs addiction got
all
erased.
Gone. It was just like I have goosies thinking about it now. Like it was just this incredible moment. And so I did a show in 2019 called a viewing art on death and reconciliation, because it felt like I could have a finale to that. And, you know, it might sound crazy, but part of my healing was seeing Susan. And so I put my mom's ashes in the vault with her sister finally where she wanted to be. And because Susan is in an indoor kind of a shelf, she's in a vault, so it's got a door, it's a small casket, it's encased in marble, and you can open the drawer and pull her out, pull that coffin out. And then a box of my mom's ashes went in there. But because of this situation, I had shown the funeral home my previous work, and I asked if I could see Susan, and I thought, man, like if I don't ask, I might regret it. Like, when will I ever get to see this again? Like, to see a physical form of the ghost of sorrow or you know, I don't want her to be that ghost of sorrow, but what she was turned into, this ghost of sorrow that kept this space between my mom and I's relationship. And they let me open the casket to see her, and they were very professional about it. There was, you know, it was fascinating that they said they'd had to exhume bodies before for different reasons, but no family members ever wanted to be there. And I thought that was interesting. How sad to not want to be there as your person, and not to be like, it's not some shocky, let me see this, but it was like, she was real, you know, and even noticing the size of the coffin being small was like, she was real. And I took some photos. So that show, A Viewing Art on Death and Reconciliation, was some new collage that I had made for Susan and my grandmother's writings, because she tried to write about the story over and over and over, and would repeatedly write, killed in a car crash, killed in a car crash, killed on a Girl Scout outing, like just so consumed by that. Yeah. And I let community come into my space and into the show, and invited them to bring maybe a picture or a writing or something from their own family story or tragedy or memorial thing. And it was so incredible how many people showed up to participate. You could also just put something in the fire. You didn't have to you could be in the community collage, or you could put something in the fire. And it was incredible how people showed up to participate. And that was, you know, kind of the finale of this show, of these shows about the subject, I thought, right? And then I could see where that was helpful to people. And in 2022, I did a show called From the Altar, art on the magic of living, or the beauty of death and the magic of living, where I invited people to come to my studio and pick out something from my death altar. And that was incredible, because it's on the subject and the beauty and the sorrow and the grief and the joy and the nature and all of those things, the love that goes into death, and people really showed up for that as well. It was over 40 artists, I believe. And I expected to have the book done for that show, because I thought I need to put all this in a book. And it felt like an activity book would be so cool to help. We're talking about hard stuff, but then now write your stuff, you know, or make some art around this, or explore where you're thinking about this.
Do you advise people so is grief like a force, and do you and let's assume it is, do you advise people to like walk towards it, or like walk away from it? Because I think, like, for example, my mom passed away 3 years ago, a little bit over 3 years ago, and I'm like, I want to talk about my mom, like, you know, and I guess people may assume that, oh, poor, like, I don't want to talk about, how do I bring up his mom, you know, or like, people think that it's like, and I'm like, no, like, I like to talk about my mom, because it feels like that's the way that she's gonna kind of stick around and be. So, but grief is different, right? Like, everybody grieves differently. Right. So, and
that's huge. That's a huge thing to notice. Like, talking about our loved ones that are gone is like a gift of grief. Like, allowing your friends to talk about the people they've lost is a gift.
So you would say, because I think, is it art that is, what do you attribute to, like, you kind of going to the next stage of grief, which is being amazing? Was it art? What, the vehicle that gave you that?
It was, I think it was, yeah. And I think, you know, I mean, really, I don't have a lot of grief, which it feels I don't ever want to be an imposter of grief. I have grief, but I don't have, like, and it's not about comparing grief. And I would never tell someone how to manage their grief. But I think that when we talk about death, it makes grief easier. And when we think of grief as another way of love, instead of like grief being this dark spot of losing. You know, I made a little snippet about this because I was so shocked to be sitting with a woman who was dying and was so sad that everyone she knew was dying. And this chaplain came in and he said to her, you know, something about grief is the death of love. And I'm across the room as a volunteer, like trying to not have a look on my face, but just like, what a terrible, terrible thing to say to someone who's dying and talking about the people she loved, because love does not die. Right. He said, grief is the death of love. And I was like, I couldn't get that. So grief is different for everyone in every different situation. And I love that we talk about it more instead of, like, I think I kind of spotlight my stuff so others know. When we talk about others, we talk about our stuff, we feel less isolated and less alone in that. And I was talking to my husband about, he asked about a sign that there's a picture of in the book. And I was mentioning the billboards and this sign that she made. And, you know, I think of Chandra Boone, Janicer, I should say, and they have a daughter named Hannah Janicer who died when she was 4 years old. She fell out a window and died in her mother's arms. And she would have just been 18, I believe, maybe 16. But so here are two ways to handle the death of the child, right? Or two examples I have. And I talked to Chandra early on because I was thanking her for the work that they've done. Like, they have the Hannah Janicer Foundation. They have billboards. They have safety awareness. They have kept her alive. They have symbolism. They have, like, they share about their grief. They share about her. And what an incredible way to keep her spirit going. And it takes so much strength and courage and presence and really navigating. You know, none of us want to think about the loss of a child. You know, I think we talked that our first thought is like, my child goes, I'm out, you know, right? Yeah. Like, it's this thing. And it's this thing. And also in recovery that, you know, was mentioned to me, like, can you stay sober through the hardest things happening? But I'm not going to be of any service if I'm not sober. So, and then you have my family who had the death of a child. And the depth and the sorrow and the addiction and the hiding and the shattering, the no holidays, the bitterness and the betrayal and the just ongoing, how that affected them that way. I don't know that they know they had a choice, but it's really interesting to compare those two ways of doing that stuff. So everyone's going to do their grief the way they do it. I love that there's more community and more talking about it and more like resources. Like, there's the Grief Academy. Hamilton's has this website that's the Grief Academy that you can go to, all free resources. I decided I could be a death worker. And a great person that worked. I was doing yoga and meditation for an employee event at Every Step Hospice. And I talked to the director there, and I was like, I want to be a death worker and help people. And there's these classes. This was 6 or 7 years ago. And there's classes that they offer in Iowa City once or twice a year. And, her name was Leanne Thrain, I believe. And she said to me, you know, what's better than a training? You know, you'll never get anything out of a weekend training, but you need to go be a volunteer. And so being a volunteer was like the way to be with people and sit with people that are grieving, people that are dying, people in all kinds of ways, people that are accepting that they're dying, people that don't want to talk about the fact that they're dying. Yeah.
Is grief suffering?
I'm sure it can be. I have a tendency to see it as love, but I know that it can be suffering. I know it comes in waves. I know it changes. I know it can feel like it's gone and then it shows up. I feel like I personally have.
So you tapped into grief or into as a way of love.
Yes. Yeah. I think it is another form of love. Like, some people will say it's love that we can't, it's love that has left us, or love that no longer is living, kind of thing. But I think it can come in all kinds of ways.
And I was making some notes, so I'm on my phone because I was like, throughout the last 2 weeks, I've just been making notes. I'm like, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. So, faith, I mean, you're around people and families that are seeing their loved ones or themselves in their last days. Yeah. So, what's the relationship between that faith and death? I don't know if there's even a full question there.
Yeah.
Because it plays a role on how they handle things, right?
It does. And it just means that I allow them to be where they're at with it. Like I'm just there to support them, support the person doing the dying, support the families. Really, it's telling the families that they're doing a good job. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And however their faith is, like I honor it and respect it and invite them to bring it in. Sometimes we forget we have faith when we're in the really hard stuff. And so inviting people to bring in whatever that is, if it's prayer and meditation, if it is ritual, if it is music, if it is however that is, if it's the Bible, if it is, however that is, bring it in. Like this is when we bring all it in. This is a sacred space of dying. When we hide from it and make it sterile and quiet, or, you can, I feel like that I see people regret that more because they left someone for the professionals to take care of instead of being there. But a lot of people are showing up more, like whether it's, and it doesn't have to be at home all the time. There's a lot of home care, there's a lot of hospice care, and there's a lot of people that die in hospitals. And faith can be a really big part of that. There's cultural, incredible things that happen there. I never want to tell anyone how to do anything that they do that way.
This is not to be silly. This is, but like you're near death and a lot, right? I mean, more than the regular person.
There's a young person that I'm working with now, he really doesn't want to die. His family doesn't want him to die at all. And it is, and I mean, working with I just mean showing up for, like a non-medical presence that's there as a neutral, compassionate, let me know, we can talk about all of it. And I think, people quit visiting people in hospice because they get scared. We're scared of death. We're scared of, like, people don't look like each other. I see people at almost unrecognizable to their friends. A lot of times I see people when they've lost a lot of weight, or they've been sick for a long time, or medication is kicking in and doing things differently. And it gets to just be like, you get to be in the room with a dying person and not make it about you. Yeah. We make it about us. And I just was talking to a young person in this realm, and he was like asking about what I'm doing here and how I do it. And I said, a lot of times we'll bring our own fear, our own grief, and our own sorrow to the person doing the dying. And maybe we're not even seeing that person. We're seeing what happens when I die, or what happens when my person dies, rather than just accepting and acknowledge and being present for this human that's doing the dying.
What do you think happens when we die?
That's a fabulous question. Like, I hear a lot of it and I have no idea. I love all these ideas of, I've read, I picture like this scattering into like little particles and floating away, and like, I often will offer in a death meditation or a meditation. The death meditation is lovely too, because like, what are the things that are said unsaid? What's unsaid in your life? What do you want to forgive? Like, why do we wait to be near death to decide to really live? Because we think we have all this time and we don't want to talk about death. But I'll invite people to, like, do you want to just, scatter into the mist and float into the stars? Do you want to float into the flowers? Do you want to be into the ocean? I think we keep going. I think there's some essence that keeps going. I don't know what it is or what it looks like, but I know I've felt people at death, after death. Like I say, my mom, I felt her more when she died than I had the last couple of years of her life, because she was tormented by medical conditions. But to feel her love and her presence, but we have to work at it. It has to be a relationship. It's like with our ancestors in the sense where you have to invite them. Like, and I remember that I'm working for my mother and for Susan and for my grandmother. I'm working for them. They're not working for me. And so I use an altar, but it's like, where do you want it? What do you want it to be? You can go to heaven if you want to. You can go be a star if you want to. It's this. wide open thing.
You talk about the art of forgiveness. Is that part of kind of finding peace in as you kind of go into the sunset? Like what that has to be. Why wait until you're on your deathbed, right? Like you just start forgiving yourself. Can you speak a little bit about that? It
feels like freedom. Like if I want to hang on to something, like I felt like I had to create freedom for my family because they wanted to hang on to their resentment and their bitterness and blaming someone. They were so hung up on somebody taking the blame. And so if I know that the other family, the woman driving the car and her daughters, had a terrible time of it as well afterwards, because this is a small town. And I saw a letter where my grandmother had to work next to the woman driving the car. And it was like, she didn't want to do that. They were working at Broadlawns, and, I know they had a terrible time of it. I know that after the nurse who sent them away or told the doctor he didn't need to come there, I'm sure that weighed on her. Yeah. It wasn't just my family that was affected by that. It was all kinds of people, in a tragic way. So my job came, in order for me to have freedom and forgiveness and to pass that to my children, my job came to be to forgive them. And at that community art show, I invited Blank Children's Hospital. I invited the Girl Scouts. I invited everyone involved, and I explained it to them. Like, this is about forgiveness of this event for my family, and you're welcome to bring your own stuff. And what's kind of wild is that I saw that Mary Ann McBride, the driver of the car, had died a few years ago. But her daughters were twins, and I don't think they're paying attention to me. So their names are Mary Ellen and Marla McBride. And it took me a minute to find them, but I found them, one in California and one in Kansas City. And I have cards that they wrote to Susan. And Mary Ellen was in the car with Susan. She's the one that got rushed to the hospital, while Susan had to take extra 30 minutes to get taken home. And I found her as a therapist in Kansas City, and I was so excited. And it was during the second show, that Death and Reconciliation show. And I was just so excited to find her, and so excited to say that I'm doing this work. I'm sorry for my whole family, for your sorrow, for your mother's sorrow. I forgive you, on behalf of my family, just to acknowledge that I'm sure it was difficult for them as well. And I thought it would be so cool because she was a therapist and she would hear me. And I called the number that I had for her, and then she texted me back, and it was like early emoji time, right? Like it was early emoji texting time, and I'd never had anybody send me so many emojis, and I was like, oh, this is exciting. And I called her and I told her who I was. My name's Amy. My mother was Barbara Wharf. My grandmother was Bernice Wharf, and my aunt was Susan Wharf, and she was riding in a car with you, and there was a terrible accident. And she said, I don't know who you are, and I don't ever want to talk to you again. Don't ever call this number again. Oh. And if my initial thought was like, okay, B. Like my first reaction isn't always the right reaction. I was like, oh, like I was ready to fight. And then I was like, oh no, this is about forgiveness. Yes. She's not ready. They might not want to talk about it. They're not here for that. And I get to mind my business. I've said what I needed to say, and I get to let them be.
That's the way that it impacted them.
Yeah, right. And I do follow the other daughter's daughter on Instagram, and I've let her know a little bit about it. And I've sent them a postcard to the show, but I have to navigate myself. Like, is that you being like catty, like, oh, I have this show, like, but I mean it. I mean for it to be this forgiving way. And so,
and I'm sorry, but you also say that we all have stuff that holds us back from shining, like shame, trauma, addiction, grief. How do we know which one is?
How do we know? I don't know. I think we have to look. Like, I think we all have some of these things that, I mean, it's kind of this like we started the conversation, like death and life and recovery, and it's just life stuff. How can we not have something that holds us back? Like, it's hard to live and be alive and have relationships and have kids and be a kid and be a friend and a person that takes care of the earth and all those things, and not have those things. And we're in I think generationally, we're in a way we're talking about, we talk about these things more, but sometimes we don't know. And sometimes that means having conversations with your parents and or whoever's there to talk to. Like, we might be surprised. Like, I've learned more about my family history in the past few years than I ever did before. You know, that there was another aunt that was pregnant at 13 that got kicked out of the house and sent away. And there was another child, like someone else had a child that died. So why is this one such a big deal, but that one you never talk about, right? So I think we kind of get to investigate that. We
have to explore, right?
Yeah, explore and talk to others. And sometimes it's research that if there's no one there, then there's some research in libraries and online that we can look into. And noticing, like, I notice, like, I will notice even in recovery, 20 some years, like, I don't know if me saying I have trust issues makes me have trust issues or if it's just embedded in me, right? Like, but I'll notice where, as a working artist or as a person that wants to show up so much for community, I'll sometimes hide myself from other things, like, I mean, really, like, I'm about to do, I'm going to do a little book event at Beaverdale Books on the 1st, which I look forward to. I just finally got everything on the website. Like, you can buy the book on the website now, but I've been like slowly, because why does anybody care? Like, the world is burning. No one cares about you. And like, aren't you sick of you yet? Like, we still have those little voices and those trust issues. And I love that we were talking about our daughters, and Helen moved to Richmond, and how that's the time when they move and they're doing the things we want them to do in the world. Our kids, like, growing up and shining, like, that's not our time to cower and hide and like, oh my gosh, my kid left me. That's the time to continue being that example and being there for them. But I think about doing like that. Those are the places where I look into myself and say, what do you need to work on? Because you're still playing this game with yourself of playing small, and I use this playing small thing funny because I love the term in the book where I talk about getting small, which is just about being a small, little, amazing light in a great big world of all these things. And like having humility and like, you're not running the show, but also there's the sort of negative version of that, of playing small, where not shining as bright and then wondering why no one sees me because I don't really want to be seen. It's like, no one knows it's my birthday, but you didn't tell anybody it was your birthday.
Some people call like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
That's another term that could be used where you're like, oh, I don't, that shouldn't
exactly.
be this.
And it's just like, so I like to think of Megan Thee Stallion as my example of confidence, like, okay, she's my confidence. Like, quit trying to be your silly little self and don't bring your stuff with it. Like, have an example of confidence and just show up. And she's really great at talking about, her own, insecurities or anxiety or whatever, but it's just like the tools, like my tool of like, oh, I don't belong to me, I belong to someone else, so I'm going to take great care of it. Like, how do I keep having the follow through?
Yes,
because we're in such a world of everywhere you go, it's like, here's this terrible thing, or here's this amazing thing I'm working through, now buy my book, and it's like, right? It's like, I struggle with that a little bit, and it's time to not struggle with that. I've just ended a 30-year career as an artist and art director of a company that I watched go from 10 people working there to 120 people working there in galleries all over the country by giving them, a huge portion of my love and passion and creativity and storytelling and who I am as an artist. And I knew it to be this way, but it's, I'm leaving like, okay, bye. Like, oh yeah.
How do you, the question is, why Shapeshifter? Why did you name the book Shapeshifter?
I just love the idea of, the shape shifting that occurred in myself, like to go from who I thought I was, you know, some tough and cool artist, dark, self-loathing kind of, that makes me interesting and makes me, we're painting in blood and we're being like fascinating too, like now I'm like a love and light person, you know, like showing up for others, and how do I show up for the world? And that was a real shape shift to me, because I was very much, I felt that I portrayed myself as being unapproachable, but I'm sure my vision of myself and the true self are not the same, right? Like a little kid that was silly and happy. I loved making art for my mom. I loved roller skating. I adored my sister. She was really mean to me, and it crushed me, you know, and she doesn't remember any of that, which is fine. I love her so much, but it is like, then you build up the armor of like not being touchable, like building up that armor of being like, yes. And I would hurt myself. And then I got the tattoos, and the tattoos became symbolism of strength and courage and femininity and independence and badassery and animal magic and elemental magic and all the things we want to be. And then I'm in a relationship I never thought I would be in. I don't believe in rejection. I was always telling my friends to be, you know, to level up in your relationships and never let anyone make you feel less than. And then there I was, like with a guy that's like, are you going to draw another cat? Or like just could hurt me with words so well. And then it was led into the drug overdoses, and then to lead into recovery, and to soften and to let go and to shapeshift into this whole other way of being. Like it's just how we're so temporary. Our lives are temporary, and tomorrow will be different than today. The same questions tomorrow would be maybe a little different than I answer them today. And
right,
so
right.
it's this way that life shapeshifts, that we shapeshifts, that death and grief and love can be a part of all of it, you know?
And I think part of, you know, what was the question that's coming is that when you said that you kind of you make yourself smaller and not, you know, and how do you practice exercises to be confident, and how you mentioned the shape shifting of yourself. So it's more important, basically what I'm saying is to pay attention to our own perception of who we are than other people.
Oh yeah. It's none of my business what anybody thinks of me. That is not my business what you think of me.
So
I love that.
You're now just inward.
Yeah.
Is that when people say you should be selfish? Like some people say it's healthy to be selfish, because like if you care for yourself and you take care of yourself and you take care of yourself as if you belong to someone else, then eventually the next step is for it to show into the world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what makes us smaller, is because we're thinking about what that person's thinking of me, and then what that person.
Right. Exactly. Because it's that same thing of like, I can say it's not my business what anybody thinks of me, but there's a voice in my head that's like, girl, they're so sick of you. Like they are so sick of you, like showing up and shining and being yourself and being silly and dancing at the grocery store or whatever it is you do. But that is just fear. You know, like fear is just this weird little insidious thing sometimes. And it's just continuing to show up for yourself and do the difficult stuff, because everybody's different in that way. Like some people, that being selfish part, like some people get so consumed with having others be the thing that makes them feel whole that they forget who they are. Like they're so worried about what other people think of them, or they so need the relationship to define who they are, or the job to define who they are, when none of those labels make us who we are. And so it's like even being an artist or a podcaster or whatever, we are all those things. We are all those things. We're more than all those things. So it's like just remembering. The thing that works for me is being an example for others. Like getting over, like when I want to hide and be like, you know, it's just like, just stop and just do it anyway. You know, like you're doing it in your own home. You can do it with others and show up. And
are you afraid of death?
No. I don't think so. I have my son already lined up to be an art project because it's got to continue with me. If I'm going to go through all this and open a coffin and make all this artwork and like tell the story, then, and I also keep saying finale, 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 but like I visualize myself being able to know whether it's a terminal disease or old age or however that is, like I want to be leaning against a tree and I want to like be getting ornaments and decorations and decorative like things all over me as I go. And I'm like, you got to film it. You got to like time lapse the decomposition of my body against this tree. And, you know, there's a lot of really fascinating ways that we're dealing with body disposition now, where there's a great a great TED Talk where this gal has invented this mushroom suit. So you can put on this suit that it's almost like the Tron movie suit. It's got these tracks of mushroom spores. And then when you're in the ground, you become like this incredible mushroom sort of thing. Or you can also eat the mushrooms. Yeah. And you can, like Iowa's pretty cool. If you have land, then you can be buried in a shroud or in a box. Like you can be buried on your own land. I'm not afraid of death. What I do encourage everyone to do, like right now, is to write a letter to the people that you love. Because I've seen a lot of people that either have like a catastrophic medical situation or old age, dementia, Alzheimer's, illness, medication. We become different. And there's people I see, parents visiting children, children visiting parents, and we're different. They're different. They're not the same. And so if you don't, like I'm working on it. I just told my daughter, like, I'm working on this thing. It comes to me in the night to write this note, to tell her and her brother in different ways, all the ways that I love them and all the ways they have filled my life and my heart and myself, not in a way of, my mom was really guilty. Like, I did all this for you. Like, I married this doctor that's 30 years older than me. So for you, when really she married him for his money and his drugs. But like, write the letter to the people you love. I'm not afraid of dying. I hope to be an art project too, like in this legacy of
an art project
weirdo, right? Like, it's the thing. We've got the art projects and let's do it. But I think telling our people that we love them.
What does your son tell you when
he's down? Helen said, no, you can stop now. I'm done with this. Can you be done with this? And Isaac's like, I'm there for it.
Yeah.
It's been several years. He was pretty young, but I'm just like, we'll set up the tripod. You just navigate the thing. And even if it's just a picture or two, you can say that you did this and these were my wishes. And that's how that goes. And it's amazing culturally all over the world how we deal with funerals and burials. Like, I love the idea of a sky burial, a Tibetan sky burial, but I also don't need to infringe on Tibetan practices, say, chop me up and put me in the sky for the vultures to eat, and then, do what they do with eliminate to become something else. But there's beautiful tradition and acknowledgement and acceptance all over the world. You've seen I was going to say taxidermy. I mean,
it's not morbid to talk about death, right? Like,
no,
in a way,
right?
it can be healthy, right? The Stoics say that if you contemplate your mortality for a brief moment each day, it actually makes you be a better person, because, like, what if today was my last day? How would I want it to be? Right,
exactly. What unfinished things do you want to do? Like, we think we have all this time in the world, and it's also temporary. And remembering that, I think, is really important. And remembering how we change and evolve as humans, as we age, as we change. Like, I think I'm fascinated by the people that don't want to talk about it at all. Like, my dad refuses, and then it's so fascinating. It's like, so what you going to do when it comes for you? Like, it's coming your way. Like, but I never would pressure him.
Right.
I just talked to him about his childhood. Like, sometimes our people don't really want to talk about, death and the moment and what's going on with you. So, like, talking about their childhood and talking about their past. And, you mentioned your family losing a sibling, right? And how that can affect the whole family, and how you live in that space, and how you and your siblings handled it differently, right?
Yeah. It's I mean, to me, it's a memory because, you know, I was a baby when my sister passed away. But I always kind of, what would make me more sad, it was imagining how sad and how my mom felt when she lost a baby that was like a year and a half old. And that when I think about that, it just like breaks my
Isn't
heart.
that so sweet? That's so sweet that we think of that you think of that and can see that and picture that.
What is your life motto?
Oh, my life motto? My motto. I like this one. I think it's still in use. I've used it for years. I made some patches with it because let yourself be loved is a big thing for me, because I was pushing people away like that wanted to love me. Like this is a life motto and kind of a work motto and a showing up motto as an artist, as a person that's sharing. Like, obviously I share my personal business all over in the form of artwork and in writing and in storytelling. And if I didn't feel loved and supported, then I may not do that. And so I noticed where, because of you know, maybe a couple different experiences or perception, I would push people away that were trying to love me, or push even the world away, or the universe, or whatever. And so I reminded myself to let myself be loved, to soften, because it doesn't have to be a dangerous thing. Someone loving me doesn't have to mean they want something from me or that I have to give them something. It is just this way of letting yourself be loved, like showing up for others, for loving yourself to that space that I mentioned before, where if I'm good with me, then you don't have to love me. Like, I don't have to have my partner or if someone I meet doesn't really like me, or if I'm working with someone who's dying. I've met lots of people that initially don't want to feel like they're being babysat by a white girl with tattoos in their house, you know, whatever that is. And it's like, that's okay with me. I can show up and still be there. Like, I love myself enough for them to not have to love me or like me, but I'm here to care for you. But it's this bigger picture of let others love you, let the world love you, let myself love me. That was a big deal for me, because I was a little bit of a, you know, chihuahua in the corner. Cat in the corner. Don't touch me. You know, like, I didn't believe that love was even real. Like, I didn't believe, my mom told me people will just ever only hurt you and are just out to get you. And I did not think that it was a real thing, you know. And I had to do research on, I wasn't sure that my husband was it. I knew he was fun and funny, and I've known him forever. And I was like, you're not my pick. I'm not his pick. But having to do the research on love and participating in a relationship instead of the relationship happening to me. And love became like this big topic that I never expected it to be. I was just like, oh, how did I get so mushy?
And it's important because we don't want to do the same mistake, right? We don't want to pass it to our children, or at least only give them a little bit of the trauma, not all.
Right. Well, and we've talked before, like, boy, have they had enough? Like, maybe we overcorrected. She doesn't want to order a burrito on her own.
So how can people find your book?
My book is now on the website. It's amyputneykonigart.com, and you can pick up locally, or I'll be happy to mail it. I have an event at 6:30 p.m. at Beaverdale Books on November 1st. I'm looking forward to. November 30th, I'll be at the Brilliant Craft Fair. Like, this is a big deal for me because I don't do a lot of markets, but I'm looking forward to that. That will be in November, like I say, the 30th at the Valor Ballroom. And that's kind of where it's at for now. Like,
it's a beautiful book. It's broken down in they're not chapters, but they're like stories. Yeah. And so and it's got art in it, and it's got beautiful pictures, and it's got the death certificate.
Yeah, it's got the receipts. It's got the story of Susan's death, and kind of these 10 little essay chapter type things that kind of drive you through the story, and sort of the artwork that went along with it. So there's the collage that are the the art of family tragedy, the family tragedy, the inherited stuff, and the how to be amazing anyway, like the paintings that were bright and colorful. So there was that distinction between the collage and the painting. And they're kind of in there as best I could do. There's a little poetry, there's a little color page kind of thing. And my sassy selfies from the 90s, and like when I definitely wasn't who I thought I was, you know, and
that
just,
was another shape that you shifted from.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've been like, just inspired by making art. And there was a time where people were like, why do you use selfies, or why do you use pictures of yourself? And it's like, well, it's kind of about me, and I'd rather use me than have someone else and say, can you look really grumpy, or can you look really mad? And it was, you know, I would make hats that were about the male gaze, like, you know, and I come, you know, being my age, there was a time where you would still get looked at, like you would walk down the street and like either it was, you know, older people in the mall that were so mad at you wearing a trench coat and having pink hair, like they would just be angry about it. Or there would be the men that would say something when you would walk by, you know. And so I always wanted to address this kind of this feminine power sort of stuff. So it's interesting how it's undone.
You were able to encapsulate all of that into this book. Yeah. Because I was like, there's like tips, artistic practice, and then you give tips on what to do.
At the end of each chapter, which I love. And each chapter could honestly be like so much bigger, and like I wanted to not make it so personal or so heavy or so that it's almost like a little snippet, and it's not the whole life, it's just the part of my life that surrounds the death of Susan. And that how I was able to kind of put it all in a package and be done with it with love and forgiveness and acknowledgement and sharing her story and making art about it, you know. And I've met so many people that have had tragic car accidents in their family, that have had, you know, grandparents that lost children, that they know they've been affected by those relationships, and that we all have tragedy. And just to be able to talk about it. Some people, you know, they'll say, I've had a sibling that died and we never talk about it. Like we never are to mention that child. And there's cultural differences, you know, there's crying at funerals or not crying at funerals. There's talking about it and not talking about it. But we know that talking about our loved ones is this really great gift of grief, you know, and being able to understand when someone is in a wave of grief and sorrow and crying. It's okay to cry. I love crying and the tears and the things that happen. And you know the science behind, you know, if you're crying for joy, your tears are made up one way. And if you're crying for sorrow, they're made up another way. Not to go there, but I read that.
So one last question. What do you want people to take away from this?
I want them to take away like art practices and the thought of death and the thought of what could be happening in their own lives that maybe they could create some freedom from or freedom with. You know, I don't need people to get recovery. I don't need people to be like into death or do any of that. But this is just my little story of my little path along the way that accidentally, not to keep saying little, but like there was a time where I looked back and was like, this has been a theme for me. And I think there's something here that others can benefit from. Because at all these shows, people would always approach me after with stories and with wanting to talk about it and wanting to share about it and having similar experiences. And just to know that we can get through it, we can grow, we can evolve, we can keep going, you know. There's no way to find perfection, but we can look into ourselves and our creative practices. I love the creative prompts for people that may not be creative, right? Like it's easy to forget that there's people out there that are never picking up any sort of art practice, but to invite an art practice in the realm of difficult subjects like loss and trauma and addiction, and you see that as a tool, because our bodies kind of come equipped with some tools that we forget we have. Something as simple as the breath. Like, oh, I can breathe. I can change how I breathe. I can change how I breathe and maybe get myself to relax and maybe get to myself to warm up, because we're always so looking elsewhere that this is an elsewhere book because it's my story, but then where can we come within to create our own healing and our own softening and our own acceptance and our own space for grief and love.
Well, Amy, thank you very much for writing this, and thank you very much for connecting with us. And I suggest everybody to buy it, because we all have somebody that died. We all have tragedy in our life. We all have grief and trauma and all that stuff. So it's a very relatable book because we are living in it. I wish you the best on all of this, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's a real honor to be here. I've listened to and read about some of your other interviews, and it's really incredible, important work that you're doing, and I'm happy to contribute, and it's an honor to have this space to share and to talk with you. And thanks for listening and being interested in the weirdness of this life and death and like what. So
thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And go get the book. The website is
amyputneykonigart.com.
amyputneykonig.com.
Art. amyputneykonigart.com. I had to change it up and add the art thing to, yeah. It was a server or a web whatever address thing, like things I'm not, it's there. amyputneykonigart.com.
All right.
I'm easy to find. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much. And we'll see everybody next time.
Yay.